So it's quite personal, yeah. So it's one of these things that I've been involved in, diversity and inclusion, a social mobility champion. I grew up in a mill town. I was the only black face in the village, quite literally. I was the only kid of African Caribbean heritage in a school of 2,500. So some kids got called, ginger or overweight names because of that. I got called the names are going to be any of the other ones because of my colour. My mum's a West Indian lady, and my dad is a white Mancunian, which is from Manchester in the UK. So I kind of grew up facing all these issues. I had police escorts home from school. I kind of lived up some of this stuff. That's quite different in the US. The sort of horrific murder of George Floyd is it's slightly different to the UK experience. So we have issues here as well. But the key thing is that what it's done is raise awareness. So I put some content out about Black Lives Matter, and the feedback you get is all lives matter. And I was sort of feeding back saying, look, right now this house in the street is on fire. So it's not about all the houses in the street, it's about this one, dealing with it and making sure that, it's extremely clear in people's minds now that there are issues in terms of the loss of people of color. It's not what it should be. And my view is that society should be the same at the top as at the bottom. We should all have an equal chance of giving life a go. And if we don't have that, then it's not fair. So I kind of I sent a picture out about this sort of group of kind of young black guys, all wearing black clothing actually. Probably chose to do that for the picture. And I put on I think it was LinkedIn, and I said, well, who do you think these guys are? And I got, rap group, gangsters, blah, 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 the usual you might expect.
Lawyers?
And I said, no, this is Harvard Law class in 2021. And some people, what you get is, oh my God, I'm racist. How could I think that? I'm like, no, calm down. No, if you've taken it on board and realized that we've all got bias, I've got bias, we all have. You're born with it. Disney movies, you like the film industry. Disney movies, when you've been a kid, they instill some of this bias in you because these stereotypes, all there, we've all got it. I said, if you absorb it, recognize you've got bias, right, and sort of deal with it and make sure that you make decisions in a different way in the future, especially if you recruit people or you've got a business, you're looking at hiring people, then that's good. That's change, and that's what it's about. And that's what I've kind of focused on really, is about taking the fact this issue's had the sort of light shone on it for horrific reasons, but light's been shone on it, making sure that it's constantly shone on it, and actually each of us can use this as an opportunity to affect some change.
Yeah. I think you articulated it really well, and you actually resonated on two real simple things that people need to appreciate. That this is a focus on an area, whether it be an American society, English or French society, it doesn't matter, where the playing field was never level. So if we just take America, right, they went through extreme slavery that really didn't end until the early 1960s, right? So they never had an equal beginning. So there's no point in using your house analogy. The reality is we don't need to be talking about white lives right now. We don't need to be talking about anything, right? We need to be talking about the issue at hand and that there's a massive inequity in society, and it reverberated around the world. But it's real simple. When people talk about why are they taking down statues? Why are they so angry? And all this stuff, that what they don't understand is an old saying, don't piss in my bucket and tell me it's raining, right? In other words, we don't care about now, right? The fundamental point was, if there was fairness, if humanity if it was possible for us all to be born equal, we may not end up at the same place because your chips are different than mine, right? We'll make decisions, and that's productivity. That's a capitalist market. We can talk about it in so many ways that frame. There's different health choices we make, but the foundation, we must strive to give people a fair opportunity. And so, as simple as that. It's
an interesting thing. So I did a program in the UK called Seeking a Millionaire about 2011, a bit like Undercover Boss in the US, and in this, you go into a community, they don't know who you are. I wasn't really that well known then. And you sort of get involved in the community. And I was involved in various charities. Now, I actually spent a lot of time in a young offenders institution, a prison for young people. But what they didn't actually show in the program much, I worked with a African Caribbean mental health charity. And the woman who ran this was this Rastafarian lady. And I said, why is the prevalence of sort of mental health issues or crises even 7 times higher with black men than it is with their white male counterparts? And she said to me that when you're a kid, You all think you're the same. You want to be an astronaut, a fireman, a doctor, whatever it is, a web developer. And as you go through life, you realize for some reason you don't understand that all these other people could go off and they fulfill their dreams and their ambitions to the extent they can within their kind of skill set. But you don't, and you don't understand why. And then what happens is, because you come from this maybe a more difficult socioeconomic background, because your heritage, the two are obviously inextricably linked, obviously as well. You have an issue in life where it might be a relationship breakdown, you lose your job, and the whole thing breaks down, and you haven't been able to basically achieve your dreams, and you have a mental health crisis. And I thought that was really sad, actually, and quite damning, because your point is exactly right. Is all I'm saying is, all society should deliver to everybody is an equal chance of having a go.
Yeah, yeah. It's heart-wrenching. I have a mixed race family, and I think when you are closer to some of the inequities, when they're right, you can be more empathetic, but it's surprising when you talk beyond, the issue. You say, well, how do you get past like some of the like single parent families, right? And in urban cities, it's on the rise, especially in America. There's only one way to look at it, and that's that there's a long-term education problem going on, and it's across this whole area, right? It's that these communities have just been understaffed. Their education is not at the same standard. All these things that they could go and repair. But the problem is largely back to this fairness question. They've gone unanswered for so long, and it's tragic. People empathize, but they don't care. If they cared, the government would do something.
Another story from The Secret Millionaire, actually. So I was in this young offenders institution. I met this young black guy, 19 years old at the time, probably 21 at that point. He basically done something he shouldn't. So he was very intelligent, born in the wrong zip code, postcode. Wasn't kind of fulfilled at school. He wasn't challenged. He got bored because he was a bright guy. Got through school, got more exams than I got in terms of his results. Went to college. That was a poor college. The government couldn't fund his bus fare to get there. He sort of gave up. Couldn't get a job in the local area. It's quite a difficult area where he grew up. And he ended up doing something stupid. He got caught because that's what his mates all did to make some money. And there's no excuse for that. And he accepts that. Went to prison. Got 11 years for offence.
Wow.
6 years concurrent. I meet him. Very eloquent, very intelligent. Spending all of his time teaching other inmates to learn to read. And I said, "What the hell are you doing in prison?" He tells me this story. And what he did, particularly, I've got no issue with it. It wasn't great, but it wasn't nothing I couldn't get my head around. That's when you get out, let me mentor you. So he gets out of prison, and I mentor him. I give him a job eventually. I train him as an IT consultant. He does that for a few years. One day I have to make him redundant. That was a bit of an awkward day, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Then he starts a business, does 2 little businesses, like Deliveroo sort of things. Goes back. He's now an IT contractor. He's earning twice the national average wage in the UK. He'll be earning £100,000 within a couple of years. He's got a partner now and a little baby. Now his life, you know that film, going back to the film analogy, that's sliding doors. So he's got this one track where if he hadn't met me, all I gave him was social capital. So all I said to him was, I will give you connections, mentorship, a role model. I didn't help him too much, just push him and nudge him in the right direction. I gave him opportunity. If I hadn't met me, and that's what happens when you have, let's talk about white privilege or privilege generally. You have that. It's inbuilt in your life. You have these networks and opportunities. If I hadn't met me, he probably would have come out of prison. He's quite bright. Try something again, a bit cleverer. Probably got caught again eventually and ended up back into prison. That's what happens. Very hard to get a job, so you end up back in prison. He meets me, has this connection, this additional social capital, and off he goes. That's his life. And that inflection point in his life, that sliding doors moment, where it could go either way, his life, is what we have to fix. And I can't do that scale. That's just me helping one individual, but that's what it's about, actually.
So I'll just finish on this one, but I think on this particular point, that I think the social capital, the outreach, the training programs, the cash that's spent in these communities, I think can, whether it's a collaboration with government or this, for want of a better word, this movement, this Black Lives Matter movement, is so powerful enough that you'll notice that organizations all around the world, especially in America, have put their hand up and said, we're going to go and do X, Y, and Z. So particularly Apple, Microsoft, And we might, you can pick at the programs and say, how are they actually going to be deployed? But there is a willingness to recognize, to address that fairness, whether it be injecting social capital or training and development programs, et cetera, et cetera. And the challenge is whether what tends to happen is you have a movement, but then nothing happens in the cultural spread of that story. So it then breaks down again and it retracts. And so it needs this fuel. And sometimes it just reaches a tipping point back to, say Malcolm Gladwell's book. Sometimes it happens. I don't know what happened to the Me Too movement. They put Harvey away, boom. They've had their day, or whether it's now here to stay. But some things can really, really stick. And I think this is one of those campaigns where you've got people like Apple spending so much money, it might tip the curve that when we look back in 10 years, there's more economic prosperity that starts with a foundation of social capital, training, development, and ultimately better job creation for these communities. Because you and I can't do it. The government can't do it on their own. Actually, you need all of these businesses to want to recognize that they haven't done enough.
Well, that is about, Martin, these days, businesses. So, I wrote a thesis at the university on the social contract. All the great philosophers, many of which actually happen to be slave owners, different issue. And that was about the social compact, really, which is about, businesses exist for the best of the benefit of society. So if they're not actually doing good, yes, you've got to generate a profit. But if they're not doing good now to the community, the workforce, the stakeholders, even the global environment, you've got to ask questions. So it boils down to us, and I mean the royal us, all of us, because we're the customers, we're the employees, we're the stakeholders. You've got to keep holding their feet to the fire and making sure that they are accountable and delivering on these promises. Because you're right, the news cycle already has in some cases moved on. But we can't just forget what happened, because it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again and again and again. And we need to make sure we do absolutely make them accountable. And that's down to all of us, actually.
Yeah.
People with profiles, your employer. I mean, you look at the boards of Nike and Adidas, all these kind of companies where there isn't never mind a black face, any kind of person of color representing it. And my other view is that society at the top should look like the rest of it. That pyramid should be almost a perfect shade, a blend all the way down. And what we're not seeing at the top are role models, people, if you're a person of color, if you don't see people look like you doing these things, you don't aspire to do them yourself. And again, it's important that we make sure that the boardrooms around the world, institutional venture capital, it's very, very, very little of that goes to people of color. That needs to change as well. But again, people of color perhaps don't think they can go and raise institutional private venture capital. And to me, it's all the capital. There used to be human capital, social capital, financial capital, economic capital. It's about sharing the capital in all of its forms.
Yeah, there is one great thing, even though I think that America is I live in both countries, so I think of both intermittently. I go back and forwards, but if I think of America, it's very polarized right now, and over here, I just think that there's a sense that we're not going in a strong direction quick enough, that with Brexit looming, Brexit's almost forgotten, right, at the moment with all this going on.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you think, well, where do we end up? Well, the truth is we have a democracy. And what tends to happen is if it slows down, the one thing we know, I remember Chris Cuomo saying on CNN, he said, people, do you really want this to happen? He goes, get mad. The bit I'd like to add to it is, but do it peacefully. You can be mad.
Yeah.
The start of a democracy is free speech, lobbying, getting out there and saying it's wrong. And then you use the megaphone of government to say, we've got to change something. And then it mobilizes the businesses to try and share that prosperity and drive it down the pyramid. So if we have to spin that pyramid and start again, and we have to get mad, then so be it. But hopefully, this has been.
Well, still in the US, haven't you? The US, you've got particular issues, especially the current administration, but where those protests, they're called riots, and it can be used against those people that are out there actually with the placards trying to bring about change. So you're right. Eventually you can pull down a few statues. In the UK, there's been a few slavers statues thrown into rivers. A guy in Bristol, and that's fine. But eventually you can't keep doing that. You have to take them down potentially, but put them somewhere in a building with some explanation as to why they went up in the first place and why they're now in some some dark museum back room. So I think it's important not to just ignore history, because it is what it is. Now in the UK, when slavery was abolished, the government paid out to the slave owners compensation. I got 20 million pounds then, whatever it was. That's about 3 billion today. And that money, if you actually traced all that money, it's going to show up in some very uncomfortable places. And a lot of the slave owning companies had royal charters. So that gives you an idea where that money might turn up.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't ignore that. It is what it was. A lot of these people in the UK, where they're throwing statues in rivers, they were very wealthy for various reasons. Some of it was slavery, but they were philanthropists because the way they made the money then was acceptable. Completely unacceptable, but then it was societally acceptable. So you can't ignore that. You've got to confront it and understand it and move on. But you're right. Now you have to bring about change through the channels that exist.
Yeah.
But all over time, change the channels.
Yeah, I totally agree.